Okay, I'm pushing it.
The problems facing New Zealand's primary sector have been mounting at a rapid pace. So I think it's time for open hearts and open minds. Welcome to another edition of Sarah's Country. This is your home on the matters that matter most to farming, food and fashion here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, with open hearts and open minds. I'm your host, Sarah Perium, and you are the reason that I put my feet on the floor in the morning and bounce out of bed. This is not a word of a lie. I am so lucky to have a role in this most important industry in New Zealand's economy, bringing you via video and podcast a version of Farmers Weekly done differently. And this is a part of our future and new ways of consuming ideas, sharing opinions and news. Of course, the stories are from the in-depth words of the experienced journalistic team behind Farmers Weekly. And we bring this into your home live from 7 p.m. New Zealand time, Monday to Wednesday, and then at your own leisure on podcast. So over the last 24 hours, I've been dwelling a lot on the catch-up that we all had collectively with Mackenzie-based farmer Simon Williamson. This was last night on Sarah's Country, and following the Lake Ohau fires in the Mackenzie Basin that devastated over 50 homes and properties, as well as killing many livestock and destroying much farmland. Now, Simon said that the negligence of the Department of Conservation is to blame, and not keeping this long rank grass under control through what had previously been managed through the system of Crown leaseholds, grazing livestock to manage the fires. And of course, controlled burning methods have been centuries old, not just here in our young New Zealand farming history of only 150 to 200 years. The Aboriginals in Australia have continuously used for centuries and centuries fire as a tool for maintaining fire risk. Now, you know I'm continuously optimistic about New Zealand's positioning as the world's most sustainable food and fibre producer in the world, and some may say to my detriment at times. However, we are living in a world where we do need to enact change to meet this changing world. But I do want to ask this question. When does our consumers' ideology of nature returning to the world to prehistoric levels become as intelligent as the caveman? Now, I had a good yarn to Simon after that interview off air last night, and I feel I need to share his comments. He said, letting urban politicians determine how farming should be is like trusting someone who trained for a week let loose in your mouth as a dentist. Now, to be fair to Simon, those probably weren't his exact words, but my interpretation of what he was meaning. The loss of property and animals in Lake Ohau has been very similar and close to the Australian and Californian setups. And this is what I'm hearing from the pilots on the ground, some of the most ferocious blazes that they have dealt with in New Zealand history. So many times it shouldn't have happened, as this has really been about a disconnect from nature. And when do you really care about nature, or is it simply the idea of it? Now, I was listening to the story of a B&B owner down there in the Mackenzie country who went back to proudly recover his beloved pet lamb and the cats that managed to stay safe through those fires. It was very touching. But we haven't acknowledged the loss of fencing and the stock on farmers' land around the area. And I just want to say our thoughts are with you down there. They are, I know, the most humble folk, salt of the earth as they come. And so I extend on behalf of everyone listening and watching that. So I was thinking about our animals, and animals are everything and to us living in the country, of course, as well as in urban areas as well. Whether you're farming 10,000 sheep or milking hundreds of heads of cattle, every one of us has empathy at our core when it comes to animals. And if you don't, well, check a mirror, or, you should be in a jail cell for a reason. So tonight I want our conversation in the comments to be about celebrating our beloved pets. I absolutely love getting to know our regulars more and more each night as we talk about all sorts of things, because this is the light and shade. We have to have that, otherwise life just becomes a little bit too full on. So on the comments, I want you to share with me on Facebook or YouTube, wherever you're watching live. Let's share your loyal pets. I want their names, their breed, their age. I don't care if it's a goldfish, a turtle, a horse, a donkey, or of course your beloved pet dogs and cats. For those who've been following for quite some time, my beloved is, of course, a black miniature schnauzer by Dolly. Yes, named after one Miss Parton. And she's pretty free range. It's been interesting moving into town because, we don't really believe in, walking dogs on leads in our family. It's foreign to me. And the thing is, I go for these walks in the morning around Lincoln, and you just see these town people, they sort of walk away from you, and you can tell they're cringing that you've got this out of control dog, yet they are walking, letting the dog lead, and they've got a full on muzzle, and Dolly's on a whistle to a point, to a pin drop that will stop just at the road. They take their dogs for walks in town, don't they? Walks where we run our dogs in the country. It's quite an interesting concept. I'm trying to get my head around. Anyway, I'm very lucky to have such an obedient, beautiful dog who's asleep right behind us here at home. So welcome to my home. Welcome to Serious Country. We have some fantastic guests coming up in the show. And just for fun, I'll get some pet names out of them along the way. We found out the other night Andrew Morrison is into rom-coms. And this is what I do want to keep unique about Serious Country. Talking about farming and growing doesn't have to be all serious, doesn't have to be all super professional. It is about the people because they are the core of why we farm and grow in this country. So who do we have coming up on the show? After 7:20, Federated Farmers Vice President Andrew Hoggard has confidence that scaling back the freshwater regulations from what has been announced will not hurt New Zealand's prospects of future free trade deals. His comments come off the back of Vangalis Vitale's recent webinar you may have followed around saying that New Zealand has to keep that environmental standard extremely high. We still have a lot of competition globally to keep our powder dry. Towards 7:30, Kiwis are wanting clearer labelling on imported pork as imported levels are increasing, something I have been genuinely concerned and following for many, many years. Loving to find out from Chief Executive of New Zealand Pork, David Baines, of how far we've come. And of course, what they're hoping post-election around this. And to close the show, we'll have straight off the road show that is the Alliance Group's tour around the country, talking to their shareholders. And they're pretty stoked to have a new premium lamb offer to farmers. Danny Hales, General Manager of Livestock and Shareholder Services, will join us towards 7:40. But first up on the show, after this short break, there's a critical shortage of veterinarians in this country, and its impact on primary sectors are having long-term consequences with our border exemptions. NZ Veterinaries Association Chief Veterinary Officer Dr Helen Beattie will join us very shortly to share her frustrations. This is Sarah's Country.
Everyone's been talking about food these days.
While we've been busy stacking shelves, there's a whole team behind us.
But it's hard work too.
And we don't grow it without help.
Nutritious food needs nutrients. Our soil tells us that story.
By testing, we know what the soil needs.
We make the nutrients right here in New Zealand.
And we've got it
when you need it.
And we get it to where it needs to go.
As farmers, we have a really important role in turning sunshine and water and nutrients into an edible product, and we don't take that lightly.
It's great to know we're putting food on the New Zealand dinner table.
So we can all come together.
We've got to play our part in keeping the farmers growing what they grow, whether it be grass or fruit and vegetables.
Pleased to be part of the production line that keeps the industry moving and keeps people being fed.
I have been speaking to a farmer and they appreciate what we're doing.
They're really happy that at this critical time of the year for their autumn applications, our stores and supply networks have stayed open.
You're proud and privileged to be part of the team.
Thanks for the hard work, team. Let's dig in. And let's do it all again tomorrow. Cheers.
If you are watching along with us live, I must say I do really enjoy what Ravensdown put together there over COVID, and it really does show the people behind farming and how much they genuinely care about feeding New Zealand, and so absolutely amazing there. I do have some great comments starting to come through. Now, if you have just joined us, tonight's commentary is about something super fun, and everybody has a four-legged friend. And if you don't, I highly recommend it. Let's celebrate at their names, their breeds, why you love them in the comments wherever you are below, because here in the country we certainly absolutely love our beautiful friends. Dogs, horses, donkeys, goldfish, turtles, as I said. Paul has just said, hi Sarah, we have 2 dogs. Joe Blogs. What? I was laughing. What a name for a dog. And Betty, a rehomed pup. Live in town but have an acre of land for them to share. Currently on holiday from Matamata down your way in Akaroa tonight. Oh, wonderful, Paul. The weather is a bit blustery on the peninsula, I'd imagine, today. Hopefully it clears up for you. But Joe Blogs for a dog. Fantastic. I will share with you later, and I probably have shared this in previous episodes, my favourite farm dog when I was a kid. He has a classic name. Now, while the primary sector has been hailed as a saviour for the New Zealand economy during COVID restrictions, a critical shortage of veterinarians and its impact on the primary sector just doesn't seem to be viewed as important enough to the border restrictions, as they would love to see them more streamlined. There has been exemptions, you may have heard, to build billionaires' golf courses, build or repair racetracks, and for shearers. But so why are veterinarians at least as important supporting the economic functioning of this country? Joining us now to discuss is the New Zealand Veterinary Association's Chief Veterinary Officer, Dr Helen Beattie. Helen, welcome to Sarah's Country.
Hi, Sarah. Good evening.
Good. I'm actually really looking forward to the end of this conversation because I bet you've got some four-legged friends that you're going to be able to share with us as well. Now, but firstly, can you give us a bit of a feel of the situation on the ground for veterinary practices around the country at the moment?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think this whole year has been something that we're all going to live to remember, right? So the veterinary profession is no different in that. Back in March, it was all a bit of a blur and a rapidly changing world and trying to adapt to what was coming at us at the rate of knots. So that included, operating whether you're a small animal practice, an equine practice or in rural practice, figuring out how to do things differently. So that impact has been on, depending on whether you're in Auckland or, have been out of lockdown for a longer period of time. On top of those struggles, we've got a chronic shortage of veterinarians in this country that has been a long-standing issue for, over a number of years, and that's been further exacerbated by these border restrictions. So has added an additional complexity and a level of stress for a lot of people.
What are some of the
Yeah, interesting question. So when we've known about this shortage for a number of years, and actually internationally there are other, countries that are struggling with the same thing. So we know we're not unique in that necessarily either. So we ran a quick survey, definitely wouldn't withstand peer review on our methodology and getting what we got, but we ran a quick and dirty survey to gather some data, just very roughly to get kind of an idea of what this gap looked like and what we were trying to address. Excuse me. So for our members, and we've got about 68% of the veterinarians in New Zealand, we were talking about a gap of somewhere in the 200 to 220 sort of number. And that was right across the whole sector. So big gap in the companion animal sector, actually, which is relevant to the conversation you've been having around pets and the importance of them in your family, Sarah. But also across the mixed animal practice part of our profession and also the more specifically just large animal bit. There were also a number of gaps in and around more specialist fields, so those who are teaching, for example, at Massey, or people like pathologists, radiologists who have specialist skills. So it was really right across the whole sector and a fairly even split in about a third in those groups. So pretty significant. As far as the wellbeing piece goes, the really strong message we got in our feedback on that survey was the pressure on those individual vets. So the first thing that happens is everyone just stretches themselves more and more to continue to provide service and support the people and look after the animals. So we have vets working huge hours, not getting time off, doing more after hours than they would normally be doing, which is inherently a very stressful thing to do anyway. And trying to fill the gap themselves, despite the fact there's a lack of resource. So that was a really clear message that came through, their own well-being. The flow-on effect from that, of course, is that there's only so much resilience that any one person has, and eventually, there's got to be a break point. And at that point, if we're talking about veterinarians not continuing to work within the profession, then we worry about farmers not getting the support they need, and secondarily, their animals not getting the support they need. So that, the flow-on effects long-term will certainly be pretty significant. We're delighted that MPI has worked with us, and the Minister gave us a lot of support around that to get these 30 vets exempted and on shore. But it's 30 of what is a much bigger number. So we look forward to second, third and fourth tranche imports as well.
And can I say that one of those 30 vets, for those who know Joel, our producer here at Sarah's Country, who is on holiday at the moment, his partner Sarah was one of those vets, Helen, and she is proudly stayed on, was sponsored here to stay here and not go back to Ireland because they were in such short demand, in such shortage here in Christchurch. So a great story that we are able to keep them in. And in turn, I'm going to keep Joel, so I'm really excited as well. But the thing is, you said earlier that you've known about this problem and this is not a COVID problem, and CEO for New Zealand Veterinary Association's Kevin Bryant is quoted in Farmers Weekly saying that it just seems to not be as sexy enough as filmmaking and building golf courses for billionaires in there. What progress are you hearing that continuously can be made with the Minister of Immigration and banging on his door?
Yeah, so first of all, I just want to be very clear that I'm quite sure there are a lot of very sexy veterinarians out there. So I'll absolve myself from that particular comment. But yeah, look, I mean, there needs to be an ongoing conversation, and that depends on what the border restrictions are going to look like long term. But yeah, we'd certainly have significant concern if there wasn't some ability to get more vets across the line in the sort of medium or short to medium term. So to give you an idea of kind of the gap that we're talking about, and again, these are not, particularly accurate figures necessarily, but last year there was 191 out of roughly 290 vets registered in this country that came from overseas. So every year we're importing or we're registering a whole lot of vets from overseas that help fill this gap. So that's 2/3, which is a huge number. So without that being able to help fill our workforce, then we're certainly going to be pretty stretched. And, we're stretched now, but certainly going to be ongoingly stretched if that doesn't change. Just to your point about Joel's partner, that's kind of a next piece of work that we're doing, because we're aware that there are actually veterinarians onshore currently whose visas are about to expire. And of course, it makes no sense to send them home if, we've got a shortage here. I am aware that they potentially come from countries where there's also a shortage. So I am aware that we all might be, fighting for the same reasons. But
yeah, and there's a comment here actually from one of our viewers that the vet shortage is worldwide, and a key part of this problem is the demand of disease management requirements of governments as well. And that's, we know that it was the work of a fantastic vet in Oamaru that found M. bovis, and so we would be at a loss in the primary sector without those skill sets. What is the level of shortage of farming related vets specifically? Is that even greater?
Yeah, so that's our data gave us in that 220, and again that was only across 60% of our work of the profession. So these numbers are smaller than what the actual number would look like. But we had about a third in the companion animal space, and then about a third to a third to a half in both mixed animal and large animal practice. Yeah. And then there was some equine and those other specialist areas. So we were talking about, say, 40 odd that we needed in mixed practice, and then around about another 24-ish in strictly large animal practice. So the mixed animal bit is, that's dairy, sheep and beef, possibly horses and companion animal. So there's still those people who operate in that space rather than a specialist or special interest field. So yeah, it's a significant part. It's a significant gap in that rural area. And to your point around Merlin, who diagnosed bovis, that's one of the critical roles that vets do, right? So there's the animal welfare piece that kind of immediately falls out when people think about this, but actually, food safety around giving advice around the use of drugs and making sure we've not got residues in milk and meat is an important part. But also that biosecurity, that passive biosecurity surveillance role that vets do, which is exactly what Merlin did in diagnosing Mycoplasma bovis, is obviously absolutely critical. So it's really important that we have those vets on the ground, out on farm, and surveying for that all of the time.
Helen, I just want to quickly ask you before we come about your four-legged friends, or they could be three-legged. We're not going to judge. Winter grazing. I know this is a topic we've spoken in the past about, and you have been vocal about the level of mud that dairy cows or cattle in general are standing in winter. These pugging rules that have come out, how do you feel? And I know that you will be representative of the association that you work for. Has it got to the point that you're satisfactory with?
So I don't know that I was ever necessarily vocal about the actual depth of mud per se. The conversation that we put on the table was, it seems time that the pressure is on, that the industry as a whole needs to step up and have a conversation about this. You could see that the stresses around winter grazing and some of those images that were being shared weren't necessarily going to go away without a pretty robust conversation. So that's what we advocated for. And so I think it's fair to say through that, with the setup of the task force and now subsequently the working group, the action group, that's been a good thing. That group will be where we look to understand what the expectations are and what the new expectations around winter grazing, including pugging and mud, and where that is and how deep it is. That's some of the information that we'll be expecting to get out of that action group as their work progresses.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't want to make a specific comment around it. What I would say is I think we've made there seems to have been huge improvements this year compared with previously, and it's tracking in the right direction. And I really think that the work that's being done to set an expectation across industry that everyone understands what we're talking about, what's in scope, what's out of scope, is going to be a fantastic launch pad to resolve the stresses that have fallen out of winter grazing.
I've taken enough of your time, but I do need to sneak through. Who is that favourite, or is there more than one in your household of pets?
No, I only have one cat. It's a geriatric black cat. For those of you who have some te reo will understand why she is therefore called Mangu. Yeah, she is in her twilight years, very deaf and somewhat blind, and getting progressively more demanding. So, yeah, we love her dearly.
Oh, wonderful. And I'm sure she'll be in safe hands with you. This is Helen Beattie, the Chief Veterinary Officer for the New Zealand Veterinary Associations. Now, coming up after the break, we're going to be joined by President of Federated Farmers, Andrew Hoggard, talking about the freshwater rules and will it or will it not affect our trade. This is Sarah's Country.
Delicious. Ever wondered where it starts? Does it start with care? Respect. Fresh grass 365 days a year. The truth is, delicious doesn't start in a single moment or with a single ingredient. Delicious starts here.
This is Sarah's Country. I am running a little bit behind time, but trust you, Jock, to write a blimmin' novel in the comments below. All I'm picking up here very quickly, there's many sheepdogs over the time. A handy one called Black, who's so extraordinary, could work sheep 1 minute and be a gun dog the next. Wallabies were his forte. 2 labs, Ted and Buzz, spoiled has. Pet dogs looked down on the working dogs. Yeah, they do, don't they? They get it good. And you always see those farm dogs look at the Labrador like, how do you get that much extra treatment. Totally. Hey, well done. Thank you so much. There's some great comments coming through wherever you are watching around the country. We're talking tonight about your beloved four-legged friends, or not necessarily, it could be a goldfish. Share with us the name and, of course, the breed. We're celebrating that because, of course, in the devastating Oha fires, there was a lot of loss of animals. And, yeah, Helen just shared with me off air that she had a close family member that lost their property, and this is real and felt deeply across this country. Now, Federated Farmers is confident that scaling back new freshwater regulations is making amendments to climate change legislation will not hurt New Zealand's prospects of future free trade deals. As reported in this week's Farmers Weekly by journalist Colin Williscroft, New Zealand's top trade negotiator Vingalis Vitale has warned sheep and beef farmers that their environmental and animal welfare record will come under close scrutiny. But Andrew and Feds don't think this is the case and joins us now. Welcome, Andrew.
Good afternoon, Sarah.
It's a balancing act, though, isn't it? Because there was many a very thought-provoking concepts that came out of that beef and lamb webinar, and we should be keeping a close eye on it. And Feds are playing a fine line on this as well. Explain your position.
So I guess where I'm coming from is I like to view the fact that New Zealand's number one in terms of a number of sustainability metrics for agriculture across the world. That's the sort of position we need to maintain and hold. Sustainability definitely counts for stuff with consumers. But certainly I was picking up, a lot of sort of scaremongering that if we don't have these, quite heavy-handed regulations, that suddenly we're going to lose markets. And I don't think that's the case. The fact is, with most trade negotiations, you can't really go and apply a standard to another country's farmers that you don't apply to your own. So for us to say that, okay, let's re-look at the methane target, get it more realistic. No other country's going to say, oh, we can't trade with New Zealand because they've dropped their methane target, when they don't even have, we're the only country that's probably got a legislated methane target for its farmers. None of the others do. And, our emissions profile per kg of meat and milk, number one. So for them to for this belief that, that we'll get cut out of trade deals, I don't think it's right. Yeah, but what I took from our interview last week with Stephanie Honey from Beef and Lamb following that trade webinar was it wasn't so much the fact that we weren't doing, it was the fact that we were so overachieving, we were threatening their production systems, and therefore they were only going to continue to protect in a nationalism scenario by trying to find more holes in or our already A triple plus glowing report. Yeah, that's probably true. They're very protectionist. If you look at the EU, UK, the US, agriculture is extremely sensitive to them. They protect it a hell of a lot. And so they'll always be looking for any sort of excuse as to why they shouldn't have a free trade deal with New Zealand. And so they'll grab on anything. But, I think we need to take a line that, things need to be science-based. They need to be realistic. They need to be, stack up on those science fundamentals. Worries that I have is that you potentially get situations where, public pressure in the EU, let's ban glyphosate, for example. And then they'll try and say, we're not going to trade with any countries that do use glyphosate. Now, if that ban isn't based on any real science, to me that's not good trade policy. I think we've got to maintain that solid level of, science-based decision making. There was a really good talk, probably not many people have been able to see it, by Jason Clay, who's the senior vice president of the World Wildlife Fund. And, his sort of, and I've heard him speak in person at the World Dairy Summit, and his attitude is that we actually need more free trade and protect the environment, that food production needs to occur where it's done most efficiently, and that is, what's going to help prevent, the world exceeding the planetary boundaries, etc. And so I think that's sort of the attitude that we need to be taking and progressing on a worldwide stage.
That's a very valid point, actually. New Zealand can show leadership by utilising trade as that tool to ensure that there is that behavioural change in agricultural systems around the world. Of course, favouring New Zealand. Andrew, wonderful to hear your thoughts around that tonight. Before you sneak off, you'd have I don't know. What would Andrew Hoggard have as a dog? I'm just assuming. I don't want to assume. I found out Andrew Morrison likes to watch rom-coms, so I'm happy to be surprised.
Golden Retriever.
Golden Retriever.
Golden Retriever. Yeah, it's not mine. It's my daughter's. It's called Elsa, of course, from Frozen.
Oh, bless.
Yeah.
Oh, I grew up with Golden Retrievers, and of course, coming from Central Otago, it was called Tussock. So, very original. Yeah. Hey, Andrew, a pleasure always to have you on Sarah's Country. Thank you so much, and we'll catch up very soon. That's Andrew Hoggard, President for Federated Farmers. Coming up on Sarah's Country, we will be talking imported pork. Have we actually really progressed any further in terms of the labelling of imported pork and the risk that it has had in the particular New Zealand pork industry? David Baines, the CEO, will be up with us very shortly. This is Sarah's Country.
Delicious. Ever wondered where it starts? Does it start with care? Respect. Fresh grass, 365 days a year. The truth is, delicious doesn't start in a single moment or with a single ingredient. Delicious starts here.
This is Sarah's Country. Wonderful to have your comments with us live across the web, wherever you are watching. I love hearing from them. We've got Paul there that's over in Akaroa Blogs, getting a bit old now, but used to assist me on after-hours jobs. This is After Our Job, rural milk cooling business. Great show. Listen as often as I can and get a lot out of your guests' visions and views. Helps my business. Paul, thank you so much for coming through in the comments. And of course, anyone who hasn't commented before, feel free to do so. I love hearing who is watching with us live. Kate Taylor's posted a really good research paper there about keeping vets. This is, of course, a Kellogg's paper, ruralleaders.co.nz. Check out The Time for Change is Now. And Michael has said that Colin is right and the protection concept is correct. Sorry, you're saying Andrew was just up there before. The UK farm farming community, for instance, claim to be better than New Zealand. However, they cannot prove it. It is political, not scientific. Yes, absolutely. And of course, perception is driving a lot of this as well. Kiwis are wanting a clearer country of origin labelling on imported pork, which makes up to 60% of pork eaten here in New Zealand. Draft government regulations for cured pork will mean that imported pig meat that has been marinated or injected in New Zealand and then appears in supermarket chillers alongside New Zealand pork with no recognition that it is produced overseas will get away with this. New Zealand Pork Chief Executive David Baines joins us now. David, I feel like we haven't come very far in the last 3 to 5 years on this issue.
Yeah, it's pretty disappointing. I think we've almost got to a really good place, but we're not there yet. The legislation is really good, but there's a really big hole in the regulations. So the regulations are yet to be confirmed. They were due to be confirmed in May, but the problem is that the regulations have been deferred as part of the COVID Act deferral. And there's also a big loophole in the regulations that, as you mentioned, imported pork that comes in and is slightly modified in some way. So it could be flavoured, or it could be moisture enhanced, or it could be marinated in some way. The way the regulations are currently phrased don't have to have any country of origin labelling on it. And we've done some research, from UMR research, and we know consumers overwhelmingly want to know where their meat is coming from.
Yeah, and so of course we're, 10 days away from an election. With all of the country of origin labelling policies that you've seen across the spectrum, where does any hope lie in being able to progress this further to ensure that pork isn't left out in the dark?
Well, it is covered to a large extent, but there's this loophole, as I say. So it covers fresh pork, which is not modified, and it covers cured pork. So that's really good, because a lot of the imported product that does come in does end up in the form of bacon or ham. But there's about 10 tonne of products per week that we strongly suspect comes in and is not cured, but it has some form of modification that might be a flavoured fresh pork steak. And that'll sit alongside a New Zealand pork steak in the cabinet. They'll both appear to be the same. We'll have a 100% New Zealand label on the New Zealand product, but the imported product has got no requirement to have any sort of labelling at all, other than the name and address of the New Zealand supplier to the retailer.
Okay, so in regards to the farming practices and environmental and animal welfare standards of these countries of imported pork, for those who haven't been following the story, how far apart are they?
Well, one of the big frustrations that our farmers have is that none of the countries who send pork to New Zealand fully comply with the welfare standards that we are meeting. So we're complying to a much higher level of welfare than any of the pork that's arriving into the country. So it's not fair, and we appreciate that. We're not going to reduce the welfare levels because we believe that we want to care for our animals, but we think it's not correct for the public to be looking at the point of retail and not actually appreciating that if they're concerned about the conditions that their animals have been raised in, and they don't appreciate that the imported product is from an inferior standard.
This is one of the most frustrating parts that is in our industry, and I know that there's many frustrating parts as well. Where are you at in having those conversations? Because there's some very touchy trade deals going on around the country, and bringing up tariffs to imported pork, just as the likes of Chris Claridge has suggested with Potatoes New Zealand, it comes at a flip side to everything else we're trying to achieve in our other parts of our export commodities, David. But are your voices being heard by those trade negotiators?
Well, we're certainly getting in front of ministers, and we're certainly getting in front of officials. So they do clearly understand our point of view and our frustrations. Sadly, it doesn't appear to be impacting the regulations that apply to product that comes into New Zealand. What we would like to say is that if we have to comply for a certain standard of welfare, that standard, if it's deemed to be appropriate for New Zealand, should apply to all of the product that's being presented in front of them for purchase, not just New Zealand produced product. So frustrated about that. I guess for us, we may not get that across the line with the trade negotiators, because they've clearly explained to us that welfare is not one of the conditions when it comes to trade, so that they don't even put that on the table to talk with the other party. So what we're left to do is to talk to consumers and say that New Zealand product does comply to a higher standard, but for them to be able to choose to buy it, it needs to be obvious to them at the point of purchase that some product is from New Zealand, but more importantly, some product is not. It could be from US, or it could be from Poland or Spain or Denmark. Those are the four larger countries who've sent product to New Zealand in the last month.
And no one wants to upset a US or an EU trade deal now, do they? It's interesting, David, I was just thinking, it's in comparison to our freshwater regulations, right, in regards to, say, the water usage on almond farms in California, lowering the water tables that can't put out Californian fires, freely being able to come in whilst we have strict irrigation rules and strict freshwater regulations. So where do you stop when it comes to how wonderful we are and the effects of imports affecting our country? Or is it in those particularly vulnerable parts of the industry where we don't completely supply in self-sufficiency?
Yeah, really good point. And that's something that we look at, and we wonder that if we're striving to reach even higher standards of welfare and compliance for environmental factors, but we're finding, particularly in the pork sector, where we're only supplying 40% of the country's consumption of pork, why are we having to comply to such a stringent level for environmental and welfare, when none of that is imposed upon the 60% which is being imported at a cheaper price? So we're being undercut in the market. It's put a lid on our ability to achieve more for our product from retail, because they're looking at the price of our New Zealand goods, comparing to imported, and basically holding a gun to our heads to say that if you want it to be sold on the shelves, you've got to meet this imported price level. So yeah, it's just totally unfair.
Why don't we export everything then? Or is pork still viewed as a commodity worldwide?
Well, I guess because New Zealand pork industry is very small and we have very high cost of production. So 2/3 of the cost of production of pork is in the feed, and we have a much higher cost of feed in New Zealand compared to some of those other countries I mentioned before, US, Australia, and some of the EU. Their grain cost is a lot cheaper. So they also have the advantage of scale, that their pork industries are much bigger than ours. So effectively, we can't compete on price in the export market.
David, the frustration is real, but we are talking in the light and shade of serious country around things that we do love, and it is our pets. Will you be able to share with us your beloveds at home?
Well, probably sounds a wee bit strange, but I've recently just re-established a tank of tropical fish. So I'm under pressure from the family to name them. Well, I've resisted the pressure so far, but yeah, I've just sort of re-established a tropical fish tank.
Ooh, we could do that in the comments below. Name the fish for David Baines. We don't want Fishy McFishface or anything silly like that. Some good practical...
Sophisticated. I'm after something sophisticated.
Yeah, one syllable, good practical fish names. Yes. Okay. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure, David. Keep up the fight, and we'll talk to you very shortly on Serious Country. It's David Baines, the CEO for New Zealand Pork. Now, up next to close the show, Danny Howells is going to join us from the Alliance Roadshow. He's on the road, General Manager of Livestock and Shareholder Services, to feel the sentiment on the ground following the Beef and Lamb New Zealand Confidence Survey, but as well as, of course, the launch of the new premium hand-picked lamb program. Love to hear how farmers are picking that up. All that up shortly after this short break. This is Serious Country.
Growing a better world takes courage. It takes foresight and vision. It's about dreaming big, then being brave enough to follow that dream through. To create a world where food is plentiful, soils are healthy, and rivers run crystal clear. A world where we grow more with less, where livestock is tended to with care. Energy is friend, not foe, and waste is a valuable resource. This is the world you're already shaping through imagination, innovation, and determination. So as small steps become huge leaps, you move boldly forward. And Rabobank is there beside you to help grow a better world together.
Even when everything changes, some things will always stay the same. The cows still need milking, the economy still needs dairy, and dairy farmers will always have what it takes. Whatever you need to keep milking, our job during the lockdown is to get it to you, because we know what it takes.
And I rise up, I like the waves, I rise up, in spite of the ache, I rise up, and I do it 1,000 times again. You.
Hey Hawke's Bay farmers, farming community and everyone associated with farming. Look, I know it's a heck of a tough time at the moment, and look, I'm not down there in the face of it, so I can't offer too much advice, but if I think of a tough time that I've been through was probably coming back from my neck injury, and the things that helped me were setting small goals and focusing on the things that I could control each day. Unfortunately for you fellas, you can't control the weather, so that's not one of them. But like, I encourage you to focus on those things that you do have control over and set some small goals every day. And probably the other thing that I found real helpful was getting in touch with mates, going for a coffee or a beer, and you know, hopefully you guys can get through this. I know you will. Just hang tough. Things will get better, they have to, so look after each other, hang in there, keep getting up each day, and as Paul Renton would say, keep doing a darn good job.
For those watching live, what a beautiful message there from Paul Renton from Hawke's Bay. And just speaking there to our next guest in the break, Hawke's Bay, you do have to be congratulated. Have we talked about that Ranfurly Shield match already? A Cooperative Alliance Group has launched a new premium lamb offer to farmers as it seeks to capture greater value for its products and rewards its shareholders. The Pure South Handpicked Lamb Program will use an assessment system to measure eating quality, with the qualifying lamb initially exported to the premium retail markets in Asia and North America. Joining us now from the road to discuss is Alliance General Manager for Livestock and Shareholder Services, Danny Hales. Hey, Danny, thank you so much for taking the time out of the Alliance Roadshow. Firstly, how's it been on the road? I mean, confidence levels of sheep and beef farmers has been reported at a bit of a slump, but what are farmers telling you around the country?
Yeah, hi Sarah, and it's great to chat. Look, that's right. The confidence is in a bit of a slump at the moment for farmers generally. But look, I've been tripping around Canterbury last week and the North Island, lower part of the North Island this week, talking to lots of farmers, and I'll tell you what, the farmers are pretty pleased with what they've heard from Alliance, what we've sort of handled through the last year, very difficult year, very difficult for farmers, tricky season in many respects, and also for the cooperative, but we've sort of worked together well, and they're pretty enthusiastic and pleased with what we're planning for the season ahead and for the future. And in particular, very interested and pleased with our launch of the Pure South hand-picked lamb offering.
Of course, first thing that always comes to a farmer's mind is how much. And this is with regards to extra on top of the schedule for the selection based on eating quality.
So, Sarah, look, as an initial offering, there is a premium of 10 cents, but the key thing is that's 10 cents per kilogram on top of an ABF premium that's already paid. So currently that's paid at 15 cents, so plus the 10 cents for the hand-picked, the Pure South hand-picked lamb premium, that takes it to 25 cents. And of course, it's obviously we're targeting shareholders, in particular platinum and gold shareholders of Alliance Group, and so all those animals that are supplied will also be eligible for any other payments that shareholders are eligible for.
This is, of course, following the hand-picked beef program. What have been some of those lessons that you've learned from that program that you can apply to the premium program around lamb?
Yeah, so you're right. This does build on the hand-picked beef offering that we've had in the market for a while. That's been very well received, and we've got more and more farmers joining the hand-picked beef program. And so one of the key things, I guess, learnings for us is just around getting that feedback to farmers. So making sure that they get good communication, good feedback about the animals that make the grade and those few animals that don't, and so that farmers can then can adjust their program appropriately so they can get as many animals into the program as possible.
That is a very valid point that you raised there, Danny, because a lot of premium programs in the past have indicated a simply in or out, no feedback policy in the past. And so farmers are going, well, what do I need to do to change? And all they're craving is that feedback. What type of farmer extension services is Alliance building around to build up this eating quality of the New Zealand lamb flock?
Yeah, so look, I mean, it's a really important part of the program is getting that feedback to farmers so that they can grow in terms of what they're doing in their business to make sure that as many animals meet the criteria. And so we'll be doing the same with the hand-picked lamb, making sure that farmers get that information back, and of course the information, much of the information can only be prepared after the animals have been processed, and so we'll be getting that information, feeding it back to the farmers so that they can adjust their farming system accordingly to make sure that they continue to meet the criteria.
And this is where, obviously the continuation of technology and measurability with the use of EID will be able to track back sire lines and grazing forages and things like that as well. So very exciting future ahead. So how much time have you got left on the road, Danny?
So we're 10 meetings into 23. So we had a meeting at Masterton today, and we're at Taihape and Fielding yesterday, and over in Hawke's Bay at Bridge Par and Dannyburg the day before. So we will be heading back to the South Island tomorrow. So we'll be at Blenheim and Nelson, and then the following week we'll be down in Otago and Southland, and the following week after that, on about the 20th, I think, we finish up the roadshow meetings at Cromwell. So we've got another 13 meetings to go.
Fantastic. So, what a terrible place to end. Now, Dan, sorry, I couldn't quite hear him there.
It could be worse.
Yeah, it could be worse. Danny, before you go, in terms of pets at home, we've had all sorts. We've had a geriatric cat. We've had a tank full of tropical fish. What is your favourite beloved pets at home and their names and breeds, please?
Well, look, Sarah, it's like, I mean, you've touched on a sensitive subject with me. We've lost our old dog, Joe, who lived to the grand old age of 17. As I like to describe him, when people say, oh, what breed is Joe? He's a purebred mongrel. And so I'm still, my wife and I are still mourning the loss of Joe. But one of these days, we, when we're over the mourning period, we'll look to be getting another dog. So we're between dogs at the moment.
Oh, Danny, our thoughts are with you on grieving Joe. I mean, it's like the loss of a family one. It absolutely 100% is.
Indeed.
Danny, thank you so much. Danny Hales there, the General Manager of Livestock and Shareholder Services for the Alliance Group, to close the show. Some more questions coming through or comments coming through. Alan Crosswell's just said there are a number of Southland farmers who are less than impressed with Alliance's performance over the last 10 months. Okay, that's coming through. Michael has said that welfare is part of the UK trade negotiations, and that's in response to David Baines' comments there, and a comment about him being so passionate and animated. Sarah, keep it up, please. When I read that just earlier coming through, I thought I would love to do a pulpit in the Farmers Weekly, which is the top 10 things I would protest over in the streets of New Zealand. And you know what? This imported pork thing is something that gets me animated because it gets me really peeved off. The disconnect around that. Absolute, in my mind, clear thing, a problem that we do not have in terms of disconnect of one hand to the other. Anyway, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on Sarah's Country with us live and, of course, on demand wherever you are listening across the world to the matters that matter most to farming, food and fashion here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. You can, of course, catch us on demand on podcasts, the individual interviews, as well as, of course, the full show. And this is produced in alliance with a fantastic team at Farmers Weekly. You can head to sarahscountry.com for all of the previous interviews, or wherever you listen to your podcasts, make sure to give us a subscribe so that they can download offline and take us with you on the road when you're out of that reception. If you'd like to get in touch, Sarah at sarahscountry.com. I get all the emails, and of course, if you pop into social media, check that inbox as well, and I hope to get back to all of your comments. I'm certainly seeing a surge of people getting in touch, which is fantastic. We will be back Monday from 7 o'clock. And of course, next Wednesday, we have Sarah's Country's election special. I know it's getting pretty close to the election next Wednesday, but I wanted to get it down in audio and visual. Our 5 major political parties, AGS spokespeople, on all 5 major issues and where they stand. Tune in next 7 o'clock next Wednesday for an extended version, and I will have my selected commentators on these key issues who will listen to these 5 politicians and give you their response on the practicality of what they are proposing. It's something you should not miss next Wednesday. But of course, in the meantime, good night and go well. Take care of your family and yourself, and we will be back with you next week.
This is Sarah's Country.